Today I'm going to show you why the TaylorMade 300 Mini is the club that's been missing. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I just bought this. It's a TaylorMade 300 Mini. It's the Mini Driver. I just find it always funny that there is an actress named Mini Driver as well. Now, this club is pretty new, although TaylorMade is not new to the Mini Driver game. The original one was recently released, and Callaway's been in that game, and a bunch of other companies have produced some similar things like the Mini Thriver, the 3-wood driver, I think by Acer, and some of those other ones. And I've always been intrigued by them, but this is the club that has been missing from your bag. Now, I am going to not necessarily duplicate every other review that's been out there, but I do want to explain why I think the philosophy of this club does make sense, despite the fact that a lot of people are really confused by the club. I want to explain some of the details about this club that I can't seem to find anywhere else, and then I want to test it out and show you what my results are. So, one of the things that I have been playing with is this Cobra Rad Speed Big Tour 3-wood, and that's because it is bigger than a lot of other fairway woods out there. And that's important because I really use this off of a tee when my driver just is not going to be the right club, because my driver would put me into a hazard, something like that. I'm trying to control the distance a little bit more, maybe be a little more accurate, whatever it might be. Also, it's something that I do hit off the deck pretty regularly, despite the fact that these have fake rails on it. I can actually hit this on a pretty clean line pretty well and get some decent distance. It helps me shorten up those par fives a little bit. Now, this fairway wood, despite the fact that it's a little bit bigger than the other Rad Speed fairway woods, is just another fairway wood. And really, most companies make a 3 and a 5 wood. Now, PXG actually makes a 7 wood, but why you only need a 3, a 5, and a 7 is because you can make the 3 into a 4 wood or a 5 wood into a 4 wood, right? You can just add a little more loft to this or reduce the amount of loft on a 5 wood, so you can make those in between. So you don't need a 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You just need 3, 5, and 7, and you have the 4 and the 6 by default. The problem with this is that there's such a big gap between the 3 wood, even a big 3 wood like this, and the driver that a lot of people are looking to fill that gap, including this guy. So the reason I thought this Big Tour was the right club for me is that the face on most fairway woods are very shallow, and on tee shots, you're kind of floating the club a little bit. You have to be a little more accurate with it, as opposed to just kind of sweeping along the ground. You're kind of hovering above. You can't use the ground as your index, and I like having a little bit more meat top to bottom here, just so that I can make sure that I don't just catch the bottom of the ball and sky it up, right? So for me, most fairway woods are really too shallow for me to tee off with. I mean, I do it, but usually I tee it really low, which means I don't get a really good angle of attack on it. The other thing is that the lofts are usually a little bit too weak for really penetrating shots. And what I mean by that is, you want to fly something a long way, shorten up that par 5, give yourself a chance to be on the green in regulation. And a lot of the fairway woods are so lofted that while I enjoy hitting them more than, say, a hybrid or an iron, they don't necessarily go any farther than a hybrid or iron. And so I just really have a club that I'm a little more comfortable, maybe a little more reliable with, but it's not necessarily longer than anything else in my bag, right? So I thought this was the answer, and for this whole season I've been playing with this and been happy with it. It's a little bit bigger, it's a bigger head than my Rad Speed 5 wood, and so it gives me a little more confidence both off the deck and off the tee, and I've liked it. But despite that, there are two things that I really wanted in this club. Maybe a little less loft. This comes at 14.5 degrees standard. While you can loft it down for drives, I actually have it lofted up an extra degree just so that I can get max distance. That's kind of the optimal trajectory for me out of this club. But if it were a little bigger and I could go at it a little faster and feel a little more comfortable that I was going to hit the face, I could actually maybe even loft this down a smidge too. So I would like a little bigger face and a little stronger loft. Enter the TaylorMade 300 driver. Now, as I've played the Big Tour and realized that I would love a little bit bigger face, I was really excited that they came out with this 300. I kind of think of the Chrysler 300, which is a car I also like. Now, this seems to have everything that I want here. A little deeper face. It's quite a bit larger than my Big Tour. When I'm just holding it in my hand by itself, I would just think driver. But it's not until I put it against my TaylorMade Sim 2 driver where I realize, oh, it is a little bit smaller. So it definitely splits the difference between the 3-wood and the driver, in my opinion, very nicely. So at 173 cc's here, 307 cc's here, and usually 460 for a driver. It's pretty much in between there. It's also in between in terms of weights as well. So I measured this Big Tour Fairway wood, and this came out to 213 grams with an adjustable 7-gram weight right there. The TaylorMade 300 came out to 208 grams for the head, and it has a removable 2-gram weight here. Now, that is actually a little confusing to me. I would rather this be something like a 10-gram weight so I can either reduce the weight a little bit or maybe add some weight back. 2 grams there seems very, very small, so you can't make it any lighter, but you can add weight if that's something that you really want. Speaking of shafts, this is a 43.7-inch shaft, so quite a bit shorter than the standard driver at about 45 inches, but it's a little bit longer than most standard 3-wood. So, as I mentioned, it's right in the middle of the 3-wood and the driver. So, really, that makes this a 2-wood, right? 1-wood, 3-wood, 2-wood. So it's funny that they call it a mini driver because it's definitely a 2-wood. Now, does a 2-wood make sense? I feel like there's a stainless steel bottom here. I mean, at least that's what I read. They have the speed pocket there. It obviously seems very thin. Obviously, you've got to keep it about 200 grams here. This is the 13.5-degree head, and that's what I wanted because I actually want some loft, especially when I'm hitting off the deck. Otherwise, it really doesn't outperform my 5-wood in many cases. Now, you can get this down in 11.5-degree, and if you're going to hit this off the tee most of the time, then I can definitely see you wanting to be closer to your driver loft. For my driver, I keep that at about 9 degrees. So to have an 11.5 degrees loft here allows me to get pretty darn close, especially if I can keep that swing speed up. Now, it does have this carbon fiber look around here. Like I said, it's small, 2-gram removable weight right there. It has a polished face here, which I'm really not a big fan of. And the reason for that is that at address, it's kind of bright. So it definitely kind of sticks out from the driver. So because this is all black, which I really do like, you got the black carbon fiber up here, and I love the fact that the front of the head here is painted black. This is white in the Sim 2, which I don't like, which is why I bought a custom driver, just to kind of make this all look a little bit more unified, to make it look like one single piece. But if this were that anodized finish, I think that they put on the face of the driver, so that's black too, that would just look a little better to me. And particularly because you actually use more loft on the mini driver than you do on the driver, you're going to see more of this. So this polished face here just kind of sticks out a little bit. It's not a bad thing, but I wouldn't mind it being a darker color, right? But I definitely like the fact that the top here is basically all black, so it doesn't look cobbled together. It is a little weird that they have this little unfinished ferrule right here, so you get a little bit of silver up there. But otherwise, it's a nice looking club, and right out of the box, I think it's going to be pretty much the right setup for most people. All right, so what I wanted to do was actually get some good data on this. So I actually went and used the GC to determine what I was hitting these both at on this particular day. And the results weren't that surprising to me. I was hoping that the mini driver here would outperform this 3-wood, and I was right. Now, what I was actually maybe surprised about is how much more comforting it was to hit this club. So first of all, I want to tell you that I went and lofted these as close as possible. So as you can see here, 14.5 degrees, lofted up an extra degree here on the Big Tour. I went ahead and took this 13.5 degrees and lofted it up 2 degrees, so they should both be at 15.5 degrees because I wanted to keep that constant, right? So the Big Tour, I hit an average of 183 yards. The TaylorMade 300, I hit an average of 193 yards. So 10 yards farther with the TaylorMade. Now that was off of a tee, and that doesn't surprise me in some ways because one of the things that I have to do here is really control my swing. I have to really be accurate with this because the face isn't very deep and the club isn't super long, so I don't want to be on the heel or the toe too much on the Big Tour, and I can't be too high or too low because I'll either blade it or I will sky it, right? There just isn't as much face on the Big Tour. And so what I think I do here is I just kind of throttle back my shot as a trade-off for control. The thing about this is that it's big enough that it feels like a driver to me, and so I can swing away a little harder at it, and because it has a deeper face and it's a little wider, I'm sure it's a little more forgiving, but it certainly feels a little more forgiving. So like I said, when you're setting up to the ball on a tee with this, it just almost feels like a driver. The other thing I will say here is that I could tee this up just a smidge higher than I would on this. So generally, as I'm hitting a 3-wood off a tee, I keep that ball teed pretty low, because I'm used to hitting it off the deck. I'm used to kind of scraping the ground with the 3-wood. So what I was able to do is I was able to tee it up a little higher, and I think I get a little more positive angle of attack on it, which helps lift that ball up as well. Then the question is, can you hit this off the deck? And this is where I was actually a little surprised. Maybe the TaylorMade 300, you're not going to be able to hit it off the deck as well. I don't know why I think that. You know, there's really nothing different about the bottoms here or the way they're interacting with any turf or anything. But I did hit the rad speed off of the deck, and I averaged 174. So I lost about 9 yards per shot when I'm hitting off the deck instead of a tee. With the TaylorMade, I averaged 186 off the deck. So that was almost 12 yards farther than the rad speed off the deck. And I will say here that the funny thing is that if you've ever hit a driver off the deck, you know how intimidating that is because you have this big club head face. But because this is bigger than the rad speed, but it's smaller than the driver, at that moment when you're hitting it off the deck, it kind of reads a little bit like a fairway would. So it's just a little bit smaller. You feels pretty comforting. And actually, I felt like I could sweep away at this. I actually had a couple of errant shots with my rad speed, which I took out of the equation because I scalded them or towed them or heeled them. And so I actually was more consistent with the TaylorMade 300 off the deck too. So that was kind of surprising. So off of the tee, you psychologically feel more like this is a driver and swing away at it. When you're on the deck, it actually feels a little smaller than a driver and it feels like you're hitting a fairway wood. So it's kind of nice. It just plays with your mind in a really good way. All right, so my conclusions on this is that I understand why Phil Mickelson had one in his bag, and I think a lot of people were referring to it as a 2-wood, which is absolutely what I would classify this as. So if you have a 3-wood, and I really like the 3-wood, I like playing a 3-wood off the deck to shorten up long holes, right? But I really don't personally like hitting a 3-wood off a tee because I feel like it's just a smidge too small. So if you're someone like that who still wants to hit off the deck, but want the feeling of a driver without going to a 460cc head, then I think this should go in your bag. And I know some guys who don't even carry drivers. They have gone to the 3-wood, and I would say for those guys in particular, they should definitely go to this. And because I was so impressed with the way you hit this off the deck, I actually think you can replace your 3-wood. So I was really wondering, hey, do I have space in my bag? Because am I going to want this as my replacement driver at some point, but it's not going to work well enough off the deck that I'm still going to have to carry my 3-wood? I don't think so. I think this absolutely should be your new 3-wood. So I know a lot of people are confused by this, but I tell you what, if you hit your 3-wood off a tee sometimes instead of your driver, if you hit your 3-wood off the deck sometimes because you would never hit your driver off the deck, then this is the club for you. It's just kind of taking the best elements of both and putting it into one club. For me, I have always felt like there's too much of a gap between my 3-wood and a driver, and this fills that gap really, really nicely. If you're a golfer like me and you think you're going to live a little better by playing a little better with this TaylorMade 300, I'll put a link to it in the description below. Peter Von Panda, out.
We can discover more and explore so much deeper. We can live better than ever thanks to Peter Von Panda. Peter Von Panda.
Today I'm going to show you why the I can't speak.